Khandagiri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Yamunai Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I'm sorry if you were expecting Prananath Prabhu today. We had to switch days because next week I'll be traveling. So apologies. You have to settle for me today. But we continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in the second canto, the 9th chapter. And today we are covering verses 41 and 42. So I will chant 41 just once myself. We'll read the translation, and then we will chant verse 42 together. I'll do it 3 times and then also chant. So text 41. Tang narada priyatamo riktadhanam anuvrataha shushrushamana shilena prashrayena damena cha. Translation. Narada, the most dear of the inheritor sons of Brahma, always ready to serve his father, strictly followed the instructions of his father by his mannerly behavior, meekness, and sense control. Text 42. Mayam vividishan vishnor mayeshasya mahamunihi mahabhagavato rajan hitaram partyato shayat. Mayam vividishan vishnur mayeshasya mahamunihi mahabhagavato rajan hitaram paryato shayat. Mayam vividishan vishnur mayeshasya mahamunihi mahabhagavato rajan hitaram partyato shayat. Please chant.
Mayam vividisham vishnor mayeshasya mahamuni mahabhagavato rajan pitaram paryato shayat. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Mayam vividisham vishnu mayeshasya mahamuni mahabhagavato rajan vitaram pato shayat. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Mayam vividishan vishnu maheshasya mahamunihi mahabhagavato rajan pitaram paryatoshaya. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Mayam vividishan vishnu maheshaya mahamuni mahabhagavato rajan vitaram prayato shayat. Hare Krishna.
Mayam vividsan Vishnur Mayeshasya Mahamuni Mahabhagavato Rajan Pitaram Paryato Shayat.
Yes. Okay. Mayam energies. Vividishan desiring to know. Vishnu, of the personality of Godhead. Maya Ishasya, of the master of all energies. Maha Munihi, the great sage. Mahabhagavataha, the first class devotee of the Lord. Rajan, O king. Itaram, unto his father. Paryato Shayat, very much pleased. Translation and purport by Abhay Charana in the Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation: Narada very much pleased his father and desired to know all about the energies of Vishnu, the master of all energies. For Narada was the greatest of all sages and greatest of all devotees, O king. Purport: Lord Brahma, being the creator of all living beings in the universe, is originally the father of several well-known sons, like Daksha, the Chatusanas, and Narada. In three departments of human knowledge disseminated by the Vedas, namely fruitive work, karma kanda, transcendental knowledge, jnana kanda, and devotional service, upasana kanda, Devarshi Narada inherited from his father Brahma devotional service, whereas Daksha inherited from his father fruitive work, and Sanaka, Sanatana, and so on, inherited from their father information about Jnanakanda, or transcendental knowledge. But out of them all, Narada is described here as the most beloved son of Brahma because of good behavior, obedience, meekness, and readiness to render service unto the Father. And Narada is famous as the greatest of all sages because of his being the greatest of all devotees. Narada is the spiritual master of many famous devotees of the Lord. He is the spiritual master of Prahlad, Dhruva, and Vyas. Down. There's a box in my way. There we go. Down to the forest animal hunter Kirata. His only business is to turn everyone to the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Therefore, all these features of Narada make him the dearmost son of his father, and all this is due to Narada's being a first-class devotee of the Lord. The devotees are always anxious to know more and more about the Supreme Lord, the master of all energies, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 9, Mach chita madkata prana bodhayanta parasparam katayantaschamam yam tu shanti charam cha. The Supreme Lord is unlimited, and his energies are also unlimited. No one can know them completely. Brahmaji, being the greatest living entity within this universe and being directly instructed by the Lord, must know more than anyone within this universe, although such knowledge may not be complete. Thus, it is the duty of everyone to ask about the unlimited Lord from the spiritual master in the disciplic succession of Brahma, which descends from Narada to Vyas, from Vyas to Shukadeva, and so on. Translation again. Narada, so we'll do both. Narada, the most dear of the inheritor sons of Brahma, always ready to serve his father, strictly follows the instructions of his father by his mannerly behavior, meekness, and sense control. 42. Narada very much pleased his father and desired to know all about the energies of Vishnu, the master of all energies. For Narada was the greatest of all sages and the greatest of devotees. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthapatale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Sarasvate Devi Gauravanapchana Nirvishesha Shunyavaritas Chat Deshidharne Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Chaptipanam Bhavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I forgot to invoke auspiciousness by chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya. আজকে এটা পরে বলছি।
So, in both of these verses and in the purport, it is made clear that the reason Narada is considered a first-class devotee is because he has these unique features of, quote, good behavior, obedience, meekness, and readiness to render service unto the Father, end quote. But these qualities alone actually aren't what qualifies Narada to be a first-class devotee. These are what we call happy side effects or concomitant factors. Because he's a devotee, all of these things are true about him. But what makes him the first-class devotee, the real qualification, is that he has this sincere desire to know all about the energies of Lord Vishnu, right? This is what was stated in verse 42. And then Srila Prabhupada, in his purport, quoted a verse from Bhagavad Gita 10:9. He didn't give the translation to it. Does anyone know the translation to that one? Machchita matkata prana bodhayanta prasparam. Anyone? That's okay. The translation to that verse is, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So what a perfect verse to quote in this Srimad Bhagavatam verse, this set of verses. Because this is the symptoms of the pure devotee. Their thoughts are always dwelling in Krishna only. Their lives are fully devoted to his service. So their thoughts are dwelling in Krishna, their actions, right? The service is all about Krishna. And they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So the source of their pleasure is actually talking to others about Krishna. So they're always thinking of Krishna. They're always doing things in the service of Krishna. And the thing that gives them the most pleasure is talking to others about Krishna, right? So the fact that Narada Muni is eager to know about the Supreme Lord, and that he has properly approached a bona fide authority to do so, right? Brahma, definitely a bona fide authority. He was instructed by the Supreme Lord himself. Not to mention the fact that having understood the philosophy and applied it, he then in turn became the spiritual master of many great devotees, right? So it was mentioned in the purport, he's the spiritual master of Prahlad. You know, Narada Muni instructed Prahlad Maharaj in the womb, right? So that transfer of transcendental knowledge is a very special case. And Prahlad Maharaj understood it so thoroughly, so deeply, that he actually witnessed, he saw Krishna in everything. And because he was situated thusly, when his father attempted to kill him in various ways by trying to poison him, trying to pierce him with sharp weapons, trying to burn him, trying to throw him off cliffs and drop heavy rocks on him, boulders, trying to trample him with elephants, trying to drown him, feeding him poison, etc. None of these things had any effect on Prahlad Maharaj because he was completely situated on the spiritual platform. He wasn't identifying with his material body. So he wasn't affected by any of these tortures that Hiranyakashipu was putting him through. So that's one of the disciples. And there's Dhruva. Narada is also the spiritual master of Dhruva. In a relatively short amount of time, amount of instruction, he was able to give Dhruva every bit of knowledge that he needed to see the Lord, to see Lord Vishnu face to face, right? So this is the process. This is what you do if you really want to get what you want. And, again, he was a little child, Dhruva, and he was angry that his stepbrother was the favorite to the king, and he wasn't allowed to sit on his father's lap. And so he was angry at that. So he wanted to gain a kingdom even bigger than his own father's, right? And so thankfully he met with Narada Muni, and Narada Muni said, well, if you want this, there's only one person that can give you that, and that's Lord Vishnu, and this is how you approach it. Of course, when Dhruva saw Lord Vishnu face to face, he didn't want to ask for what he intended on asking for when he was performing this austerity, because then he realized, well, now I'm seeing the Supreme Lord, and this is everything anyone could ever want. And basically, I've been just presented with the most valuable jewel that most people can't even fathom, and I'm about to ask for pieces of broken glass. So he didn't want to ask for it. But since the Lord is in the heart, he understood what Dhruva wanted. He actually gave him what he wanted. He gave him Dhruvaloka, the North Star. And the Saptarishis, actually all the planets, revolve around Dhruvaloka out of respect. So he's a spiritual master of Dhruva. He's a spiritual master of Vyas. We've heard the story when Srila Vyasadeva was performing his service of compiling the Vedic literatures. Even after he compiled most of the Puranas and the Mahabharata, which included the Bhagavad Gita, he still felt despondent. He didn't feel completely satisfied. So he approached the spiritual master, Narada Muni. And Narada Muni instructed him. He said, look, you did everything right. You need to reach all of the different living entities and bring them to the point of Krishna consciousness. But thus far, you focus too much on the concessions, which allow people to do their various, whatever they happen to be attached to, but in a specific way so that they can actually come gradually to Krishna. And he said, but now what you need to do is you need to make a spotless Purana that is just for the devotees, just for those who know, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to please the Supreme Lord. So it shouldn't have any of these distractions in it. It should just be completely about serving the Supreme Lord. Right. So, and then it also mentions the hunter, the Kirata, his name, well, we don't know his name actually. They called him Mrigari. I think Mrigari actually just means hunter. Anyway, he was this special kind of terrible hunter where, most hunters, they go out and they kill the animals for whatever reason. Whether it's for food or for their furs or some for just sport. But this particular fellow, he was taught to injure the animals fatally so that they would suffer for a very long time before they actually died. And so when Narada Muni saw this, he asked the fellow, hey, could you do me a favor and just kill these animals all the way instead of making them suffer? Because this is absolute nonsense, making them suffer needlessly. And he said, well, this is the way I was taught, He's like, but just please just do this for me. I said, okay, yeah, sure, I can kill him all the way. Then when Mrigari, the hunter, actually surrendered to Narada Muni and said, okay, I will accept your instructions, please tell me what to do. Then immediately in that same day, he said, okay, I want you to break your bow. His very means of livelihood. This hunter, this is how he made his livelihood. He would sell these pelts And so Mrigari just asked, he was concerned. He said, okay, well, but, how am I supposed to eat? I can't make a living. And he said, don't worry. You do this and people will bring you food. And, like that. So anyway, sure you all know the story. So he's a very, very powerful spiritual master. He has a lot of shakti. He has a lot of influence. He is able to reach anyone. He's very expert. And again, what qualifies him to be considered this first-class devotee is not just these qualities of meekness and humility, as I mentioned before, but this eagerness to understand Lord Vishnu. That's what makes him a first-class devotee. So although we can look at these other qualities that he possessed, the meekness, the kindness, the humility. Let's see, what was let's go back to, okay, good behavior, obedience, meekness, and readiness to render service unto the Father. Although we can look at these qualities and aspire to have them and even use them as a litmus test to see if we are actually advancing in bhakti, are these qualities starting to actually manifest in us? Although we can do that, what we really need to focus on, because we can get these qualities without actually becoming dear to Krishna. So instead of trying to get these qualities independently, we should focus on this main thing, which is to understand Krishna, to have the desire to completely understand Krishna. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to, we already read the verse 10:9. I'm going to read it one more time, and I'm also going to read from Srila Prabhupada's purport to that verse, because it is absolutely amazing. Okay, so 10:9 again. It's machchita matkata prana bodhayanta parasparam katayantas chamam nicham tushanti charamanti cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my devotional service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So Srila Prabhupada says in his purport, pure devotees whose characteristics are mentioned here, so this is the characteristics of pure devotees, engage themselves fully in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Their minds cannot be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. Their minds cannot be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. It's not that they have to constantly try to remind themselves, oh, I should be thinking. No. The most distracting of all distractions could be in front of the face of a pure devotee, and their minds will not be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. This is the characteristics of a pure devotee. Continuing, Srila Prabhupada continues. Their talks are solely on the transcendental subjects. The symptoms of the pure devotees are described in this verse specifically. Devotees of the Supreme Lord are 24 hours daily engaged in glorifying the qualities, pastimes of the Supreme Lord. 24 hours daily. Their hearts and souls are constantly submerged in Krishna, and they take pleasure in discussing him with other devotees. Srila Prabhupada continues. Although, honestly, that first paragraph, we could read that over and over every day for the rest of our lives to remind ourselves what it actually means to be a devotee, and to remind ourselves that we have a long way to go, and to remind ourselves what it takes to get to that point. Srila Prabhupada continues his purport. In the preliminary stage of devotional service, they relish the transcendental pleasure from the service itself. And in the mature stage, they are actually situated in love of God. Right? So in the preliminary stage, you're actually getting bliss from engaging in this service. And I'm sure we have all at least have some experience of that. But in the mature stage, they're actually situated in love of God. Once situated in that position, they can relish the highest perfection, which is exhibited by the Lord in his abode. Lord Chaitanya likens transcendental devotional service to the sowing of a seed in the heart of the living entity. There are innumerable living entities traveling throughout the different planets of the universe, and out of them, there are a few who are fortunate enough to meet a pure devotee and get the chance to understand devotional service. This devotional service is just like a seed, and if it is sown in the heart of a living entity, and if he goes on hearing and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, that seed fructifies, just as the seed of a tree fructifies with regular watering. The spiritual plant of devotional service gradually grows and grows until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and enters into the Brahmajyotir, effulgence in the spiritual sky. In the spiritual sky also, that plant grows more and more until it reaches the highest planet, which is called Goloka Vrindavan, the supreme planet of Krishna. Ultimately, the plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and rests there. Gradually, as the plant grows fruits and flowers, that plant of devotional service also produces fruits, and the watering process in the form of chanting and hearing goes on. This plant of devotional service is fully described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19. It is explained there that when the complete plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, one becomes fully absorbed in love of God. Then he cannot live even for a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord, just as a fish cannot live without water. So we have that to look forward to. In such a state, the devotee actually attains the transcendental qualities in contact with the Supreme Lord. This last paragraph is also amazing. The Srimad Bhagavatam is also full of such narrations about the relationship between the Supreme Lord and his devotees. That, by the way, is the definition of sambandha, the relationship between the Supreme Lord and his devotees. Therefore, the Srimad Bhagavatam is very dear to the devotees, as stated in the Bhagavatam itself. Canto 12, chapter 13, text 18, Srimad Bhagavatam Puranam Amalam Yad Vaishnavanam Priyam. In this narration, there is nothing about material activities, economic development, sense gratification, or liberation. Srimad Bhagavatam is the only narration in which the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord and his devotees is fully described. Thus, the realized souls in Krishna consciousness take continual pleasure in hearing such transcendental literatures, just as a young boy and girl take pleasure in association. So we have these two comparisons. How a pure devotee can't stand even a moment without seeing Krishna, just as a fish cannot live without water. And then we have this other great illustration of how realized souls in Krishna consciousness take continual pleasure in hearing such transcendental literatures, just as a young boy and girl take pleasure in association. So we all at one point were young boys and young girls. Mother Vindhyavali and I were just talking about how we're becoming older, each of us. But at one point, long, long ago, some not so long ago, we have this experience of being young boys and young girls. And maybe some of you were brought up in Krishna conscious families and you had controlled senses from the time you were young. But probably most of us, had this experience when we were young, where we were so attached completely to the point where if we weren't spending time with the object of our affection or infatuation, whatever you want to call it, even when we weren't spending time with them, we were thinking of them, right? We were always thinking of ways to, like, what will be our next meetup? How can we meet up sooner? Is there a way that I can, convince my parents that, we're working on a school project together so we can spend more time, like this, scheming, making plans, doing all these different things. So we have this experience. So if we currently do not have that same level or more of attraction for Krishna, then that means that we have to really hunker down and start following this process the way that Narada Muni and others followed this process. We do understand that this material world is a temporary place. We understand that, at least in theory, that we are spiritual beings who are eternal. We know that we don't belong here. We know that any bit of pleasure that we can get here is just a reflection of the true pleasure that resides in the spiritual world. And not only is it a reflection, so it's not even substantial, but it's also temporary. So it's one thing is if we're getting something of inferior quality, but we get to keep it. It's another thing if it's inferior quality and it also gets taken away. So we know, at least in theory, that nothing that we can accumulate in this material world can bring us any pleasure. And it's certainly not going to help us reach our ultimate goal. But that doesn't stop us from being naturally attracted, because we're conditioned, being naturally attracted to material nature, to enjoying and controlling things separately from the Supreme Lord, right? This is why we're here. This is why we're here in the material world. So it is in our best interest, those who know, at least in theory, that actually, no, I'm an infinitesimal part of the Supreme Lord. He's the whole, and I should at least I know in theory that I should be engaging in the service. That's a good start. From there, we should understand, okay, those who have succeeded, Narada, Prahlad, Dhruva, etc., what did they do? They approached the spiritual master humbly, submissively. They rendered service to them. And they were eager to understand. They were eager to find out more and more about the Lord. Now, Srila Prabhupada's purport today, it mentions that he had various sons, so many sons. He's the original father. And of these sons, there's Daksha, who was given the Karma Kanda. The four Kumars, the Chatur Sana, all their names start with Sana. Sanat Kumar, Sanat Kumar, Sanaka, and Sanandana. So Srila Prabhupada just called them the Chatur Sana, the four Sanas. They were given the Jnana Kanda. But Narada, because he was so eager to learn about Krishna, he was given the Upasana Kanda to learn about devotional service, because this is the quick way to understand Krishna. All of these ways, Karma Kanda will gradually, through your actions, gradually teach you to understand Krishna. Jnana Kanda, through your understanding and mental prowess and logical, what's it called? Sorry, I lose words all the time.
Reasoning?
Yeah, the word I'm thinking of is it's when something becomes whole. It's kind of like matures, but anyway. we'll just have to go with those synonyms. Uh, Eventually, you can also get to know Krishna through Jnana Kanda, and the four Kumaras did. They, even though they had already reached perfection, Brahman realization, still they were attracted to the aroma of the tulsi leaves from Lord Vishnu, right? And then also, they became even deeper devotees. But Narada Muni, he was eager not to work his way through activities to understand Krishna, or to cultivate mundane logic and reasoning to gradually come to the point of understanding Krishna. He said, no. Obviously, Vishnu is the ultimate goal. That's the prayojana. So that's what I want to know about. I don't want to know about these other things. Why would I want to waste time, right? So that's what qualified Narada Muni be given the Upasana Kanda. And the fact that he followed it so well is why he had so much Shakti, that he's able to give instructions to a child in the womb, and to the point that they would actually remember after being born, that they were able to instruct a child who was throwing a tantrum because he didn't like the way that his stepmother was treating him, and he helped him become a pure devotee. He took a hunter who, the worst kind of hunter, who just got pleasure out of inflicting not just suffering, but lasting suffering. And he was able to make each of them devotees. So these are the examples we want to follow. And we see throughout the Shastras that this is how one becomes a good devotee. Bhagavad Gita says, Tadvini pranipatina pariprashanena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanana tattvadarshana. We quote this a lot. If you want to learn the truth, you have to approach a spiritual master, a bona fide authority, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. They actually have seen the truth, so they can impart it unto you. But you have to ask them in a submissive way. You have to show that that you're appreciating what's being given, because that you understand the value of it, right? And you want to somehow reciprocate in that exchange of transcendental knowledge. So the point is that this, as Srila Prabhupada pointed out in his purport to Bhagavad Gita 10.9, this should be natural, this attraction to know Krishna. It should come naturally. And of course, in our conditioned state, our natural inclination, as I mentioned, is to enjoy the senses, right? So if we take that verse, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Hold on, let me look at it again. We can change a few words to make it more accurate for us, right? This is about the pure devotees. But okay. So the thoughts of the materialists dwell in themselves, not in Krishna, but themselves. Their lives are fully devoted to not devotional service of Krishna, but sense gratification. And they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always not enlightening one another and conversing about Krishna, but usually discouraging one another, right? When we're envious, if we see someone succeeding where we want to succeed and we're not, we tend to, that's where we get our bliss from, making our competitors feel smaller. So discouraging one another and conversing about whatever, mundane politics or sense gratification, etc. Right? So this verse in no way describes me, 10.9, but it describes something that I want to become for sure. And so the way that we go from, where we are to where we want to be, is by, as we just mentioned, approaching the spiritual master, acquiring submissively, rendering service, but also to begin to actually engage our senses properly, right? So we currently have an attraction. Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, young boys are attracted to young girls, right? Or something. It's different for everyone. Everyone has their own. This is a good general one because most people fall into this category. But some are more interested in sports, right? You see these Olympians, all they do is their specific field of activity. They wake up very early, before Brahma Muhurta even, and they get their workout in, and then they have special diets, and they have special routines that they perform. They practice incessantly. So whatever your object, if you don't like if you don't, or sorry, not like, but if you don't relate to that, the example that Srila Prabhupada gave, you can relate to something. We're all obsessed with something, right? For some people, it's money. For some people, it's their occupation. For, others, it's whatever it is. But we need to recognize that natural attraction that we have for something and then redirect it to having that attraction or seeing, appreciating whatever we have that attraction for, redirecting that to its proper use in serving Krishna, right? So we accept, at least in theory, that we're not the center of the universe and we're not independent controllers and enjoyers. So if we approach the spiritual master and actually start to cultivate realized knowledge, not just theoretical knowledge, then our consciousness will automatically redirect from self-centric to God-centric. And then that's when the spontaneous attraction shifts from pursuing the objects of our sense gratification to aspiring to please the senses of the Lord of the senses. So we have this verse, almost finished. This is from Narada Pancharatra, but it's also quoted in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and it's also quoted in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm sure many of you know it. It's Sarvo Padi Vinir Muktam Tat Parat Vena Nirmalam Krishikena Krishikesha Sevanam Bhaktir Uchyate. The translation is bhakti or devotional service means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of all the senses. So engaging our senses to the service of the master of the senses. Hrishikena, Hrishikesha. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is freed from all material designations. That's one of them. Sounds good. And one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. So one is freed from all material designations, and one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. So this is the essence of our philosophy. And one who follows it properly, sincerely, with dedication and submissiveness and meekness and eagerness to serve, as we learned of Narada's qualities today. One who can do that becomes a first-class devotee, one who's always eager to understand Krishna spontaneously, just like a young boy is attracted to a young girl. So this is where we want to get to, and the way to develop that spontaneous attraction is to engage in the process of devotional service with humility, submission, to follow the orders of the spiritual master, to replace we have this conscience in our head. It's usually the voices of people who we admire, could be mentors of ours, or maybe even just famous people, or song quotes or movie quotes. But we have these experiences in our head that we've given value to, and they help us make our decisions on what we want to do. When we replace those mundane voices with the voices of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, following this process, continually chanting Hare Krishna, trying to avoid committing offenses, then we can successfully redirect our spontaneous attachments from material nature, thinking that we are the center, to Krishna, understanding that we are not the center. So we understand what is our relationship with the Supreme Lord. We understand what is the process by which we can properly act according to that relationship. And then we understand what the goal is as a result of following that process and properly with keeping in mind what that relationship is. Okay, so I'll stop here and let's see if there are any questions or comments. Anyone? No one. Okay. I suppose that means that we can end early. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki jai. Hare Krishna Bhakti Devi.